Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I'm Ian Banner. Agile Bites are short videos that are delivered to your inbox nearly every Friday morning. Depends on my workload. Today's title is Driving a Car the Agile Way. Driving a Car the Agile Way. This actually came from thinking about other things in life where you might use agile principles to get stuff done. So I thought about, if you used agile to drive a car or cook a meal, how would that be? So that's what today's short little talk is about. I hope you enjoy it. So just to recap though, you need some principles in your head before you get into thinking about this. The three legs of agile, if that makes sense. So in theory, if you know the background to this, a three-legged stool is very solid. A three-legged stool can stand on any uneven surface. It's always solid. Even a muddy surface, if one of the legs starts to go into the mud, it's still quite solid and doesn't wobble. Not so with two legs, obviously. Two legs give you a lot of mobility. Human beings have two legs. Not so with four legs or five. If you've ever been to a restaurant where one leg is shorter than the others at a table and it wobbles. Five. So three legs are considered to be a very solid kind of thing. So this image of the three-legged stool, I want to talk you through what is essentially the three legs of Agile, the three core principles of Agile. The first one of those is transparency. So showing things, making things obvious, being truthful, that kind of idea of transparency is key to most of the Agile techniques, particularly Scrum, where you use a Scrum board to show things on the wall, and you're just being very transparent. So that's certainly the first leg of Agile. The third leg of Agile is adaptation. You adjust what you're doing all the time to sort of keep yourself on course, as it were. And in order to adjust, by the way, you obviously therefore have inspection, and you look at what's going on and work out what adjustment is needed. So they're the three legs of Agile: transparency, inspection, adaptation. If I was being slightly more technical about it, I would say that that is what's called empirical process control. It's an engineering term, but it means, first of all, there's transparency. You measure things, you don't show things incorrectly. You inspect what you're doing, and then you adapt based on what the inspection has found. So that's the three legs of Agile. Let's just sum those up with the letters T, I, and A for the three things: transparency, inspection, adaptation. Okay, and then let's put those in a corner there. So I'm going to keep that TIA on the screen all the time as we talk through the next thing. If you want to know some more about this kind of area and you sort of don't want to wait for another video from me, then by all means, just look this up on the Google, three stools of Agile or empirical process control. And so I want you to think of things in life where you use this process of transparency, inspection, and adaptation to get stuff done. Now, the first one that came in mind very briefly to talk about is sailing. In fact, I am a sailor. I wish that was me sailing. I don't look that good when I'm sailing. But I do sail. I sail an 18-foot, I've sailed mirror dinghies and other kinds of dinghies. And I know about sailing. When I did my training on Royal Yachting Association level 3 trained, and I know how to sail well, and I know how to set a course. I don't know if you know this about sailing, but you don't just get in the boat and let the boat push you wherever the wind wants you to take you. You look at the wind and you set course based on where the wind is, and you set the sails to point in a certain direction, you set the rudder to point in a certain direction, you put a board down in the middle of the boat into the sea, as it were, in this picture, and you use your own weight. So you see that guy there is sitting on the side, hanging out a bit to keep the boat level, because in fact the wind is, in this picture, the wind is coming across his back onto the sails, and if he didn't sit out there, the whole boat would tip to one side as it went along. So he uses his weight to keep the boat level. So I know that when you set off, and let's say I'm going across a lake to where my sons are having a nice camp and there's food there, and I'm going from one side to the other and the wind is coming, I know that I set my course to get to where my sons are, the other side of the lake, and then I adjust. It's this TIA process, because as I set off, if nothing else changed, I would get straight to where my sons are. But as soon as I set off, the wind gusts, things change, other boats might appear on the lake. That means I just can't go ahead. And in the end, I use the transparency. I look around, I see what's going on. That's all transparent to me. I inspect. I'm not going to make it because that boat is in the way. I need to turn to go around it. and I adapt. I adapt my course by changing my rudder. I bring the sail in, I do things. Just thinking of another sailing analogy quickly, the Titanic, which obviously sank famously in 1914, 700 souls or thereabouts lost. That's a story of where TIA would have been very useful: transparency, inspection, adaptation. First of all, they couldn't see the iceberg very clearly because they were going too fast. Had they seen the iceberg very clearly, they would have moved their course a little bit. They would have adjusted and adapted, and they wouldn't have hit the iceberg. In fact, common wisdom is that the experience that the main captain had on the Cunard line, he was the most experienced captain of the fleet, his experience got in the way. He couldn't adapt quickly enough. He had sailed through icebergs before with no problem, and therefore he couldn't adapt quickly enough. And this is one of the big areas, by the way, with Agile generally, and managers. Usually in a company, managers are valuable because of what they know, i.e. their experience. And when Agile comes along, and Scrum and things like that, suddenly they feel very uncertain because instead of their experience being their value, suddenly their adaptability becomes their value. And, some people are quick at adapting and others aren't. So anyway, this wasn't meant to be the talk. The talk is not about sailing, it's about driving. And as I said, this came from a mental exercise I did about how would driving look like if you did it using Agile. And actually, the first thing to say is the first principle of Agile is transparency, isn't it? And of course, this is a picture of a window that you can't see out of because of rain. So there is no transparency in this picture. And of course, who would want to drive in a car where there's no transparency? In fact, windscreen wipers exist entirely to enable you to have transparency. As soon as the windscreen is clogged and you can't see what you're doing, the wiper comes in to clear the windscreen for you so you can carry on having the transparency. So actually, driving normally requires transparency. Okay, what's next on our list? Inspection. Well, here is a picture of someone who is driving forwards, looking backwards, if you see what I mean. Now, it looks like she's maybe reversing, but that wouldn't be how you reverse. She's actually driving forwards whilst looking behind her. And that's suicidal, isn't it? And that's inspection. Not only do you need to have a windscreen you can see out of, but you need to be able to look and inspect what's coming up. Maybe dodge one of those things in the road, potholes. Maybe dodge a pothole. You steer the wheeling around. Maybe there's a child crossing the road. You see it, and therefore you adapt. So that's an example of someone who can't inspect. Here is another non-inspecting person. They're blindfolded. Suicidal to drive whilst blindfolded. And of course, if you don't do the adaptation when there's something in front of you like a tree, this is what happens. You bash into the tree if you don't turn. So actually, as I think about this, how do you drive using Agile? It's actually the way around. The only way to drive is using these Agile techniques of transparency, inspection, and adaptation. I would go so far as to say if you don't use those, you're going to be in trouble. In fact, you can't drive a car using traditional project methods, can you? I want you to imagine this. In fact, let me give you a better example of that as we move forward. This is not my brother-in-law Dave. It's just a picture of a grumpy man. But my brother-in-law Dave, he plans the route in advance. That's gathering your requirements in advance. He prints off the Google route and follows it diligently. That's your design. Dave likes to avoid motorways whenever possible. That could be a parameter of the drive, and he always drives at 53 miles an hour. But my main point here is in the how you drive on the sort of second by second basis. Of course, you use Agile techniques, but if you plan your entire route using traditional techniques, then you end up doing it in advance, maybe printing a map off from Google and following that map diligently, whether it's right or not, whether the circumstances have changed or not. I mean, that's traditional driving. That's a traditional driving method. This is a picture of me. Not a bad picture of me, by the way, but thank you, the person who took that. It's a good picture, I think. When I get in the car and I find out where I need to go, I put it in Google Maps. Excuse me. Put it in Google Maps. And then this is most important. I reroute based on traffic. Not only do I reroute based on potholes as I drive and, speed cameras and people crossing the road, dogs and children, which we all do, but I also reroute the long journey by traffic. In other words, I inspect and adapt to get the best route possible. So actually the title of this talk shouldn't have been driving a car using the agile ways, but actually the title should have been this: driving a car the non-agile way is suicide. Everybody drives a car using agile. I hope that was just a bit of fun. To be honest, I just wanted to really sort of ensure that transparency, inspection, and adaptation were really understood as agile concepts. But I've used this exercise to understand that actually we use agile very commonly in lots of things. Agile is common sense, and we use it all the time. Now, just one point to make on this, transparency, inspection, adaptation. I was once asked by a very traditional manager, he went, well, we do that on our traditional projects, where you write reports to senior managers to tell them how the project's going. To which I would usually say, they're not really transparent, because usually by the time the report is written, they've been, shall I say, messaged or massaged or changed a little. So by the time the senior managers get a one-page report, if there are serious problems going on, they don't see them. They're not told about them. So I would honestly argue lots of traditional projects with their project reporting are not transparent. And then they certainly don't adapt, because projects still fail. If traditional projects did adapt properly to the changing circumstances, then all the metrics that we find published that say large long-term projects always fail, they're overrun by millions of pounds, none of those would be true if waterfall projects actually did do TIA correctly. So they clearly don't. In fact, because they don't adapt, I would put them in the category of failing and stupid failure. I've said this quote before, forgive me. Smart failure is doing something new, trying it out for a short period of time and learning lessons from what you try. Adapt as you go along. Stupid failure is doing the same thing the same way and expecting different results from when you last did it the same way. Must try harder is, it's not an agile phrase, because it's not about trying harder. It's must adapt what you do to better meet the target, might be the agile phrase. Anyway, there you go. I've probably spoken enough for this week. I hope that was a useful video. As usual, I'll leave you with my homework shower challenge. Other things in life that you really do using agile techniques. They're just things in life. For example, I've put down here, washing up. Do you use an agile technique to wash up when you do the washing up at home? At my house, we fill a dishwasher, and we've got a pile of stuff to put in, and I start putting it in, and then I work out better how to put it in, and I sometimes move things to fit them all in the dishwasher. And my wife comes in and makes sure I've stacked them correctly so they wash correctly. That's ongoing quality assurance throughout the delivery process, if I might use that phrase. The morning routine in the morning, do you use agile for that? That could be the case. You've got 3 things you need to do in the morning before going to work. If suddenly a 4th thing comes in, like you have to have a phone call from a friend, do you stop doing something else instead? Do you inspect and adapt your morning routine? Reading a book, is that agile or waterfall? Well, it's interesting, isn't it? Because I was thinking about this. Some books are waterfall. You decide you want to read the book, you read it from the start to the finish. I'm just reading Agatha Raisin books at the moment. I've just finished. Before then, I would read a lot of Jack Reacher books. I read them from the start to the finish. I don't stop. I don't adjust. I just read them from the start to the finish. I would say that's quite waterfall. Other books, though, maybe a reference book or encyclopedia, I might adjust how I read. I might decide, given the circumstances I'm in, I need to read chapter 6 next, not chapter 5. So I guess books could be considered sometimes waterfall and sometimes agile. So anyway, the homework shower challenge, if you don't remember, homework shower challenge means it's homework, but you can do it anywhere, when you're in the car, when you're sitting at the tube station, when you're in the shower, when you're trying to get to sleep. Just some of the things you do in your life, and are they traditional, or are they more of these agile techniques in how you do them? And sometimes they could be somewhere in between. So that's it. Just a few final points. Don't forget the survey that you can find at the bottom of this link. I love people who fill in the survey. They give me clues as to what to talk about. You can probably put in things that you think are waterfall in your life. I'm always interested in that, because sometimes when I do these exercise and training courses, I would argue nearly everything is this empirical process control. Nearly everything has transparency, inspection, and adaptation when you think about it. But tell me things that you think in life that you do that are very traditional in their methods. You do the work up front, you decide what you're going to do, you then do it, you don't inspect and adapt as you get along. So don't forget the survey, and also if you know anyone else who would be interested in these Agile Bites, just forward the email you got to them. If they click on the link there and they're not registered for the Agile Bites, they'll just be asked to register instead, and they'll start the process. They'll start with week 1 with the first of the videos. So my name's Ian Banner, thanks for listening, and I look forward to spending some time with you when we next do an Agile Bite.